Go to Paula Reed. She's been reading through the opinion. Paula, what are you gleaning from it?
All right, Pamela, here's what we know. This is a big win for President Trump because he has been railing against these so-called nationwide injunctions. This is the power of a single judge to block an executive order for the entire country. And this case came up as a result of multiple challenges to his effort to limit birthright citizenship through an executive order. Now, here it appears that the justices are agreeing with Trump and limiting this power that judges have to block a policy for the entire country. Now, on another issue, it does not appear that they have weighed in on whether Trump's effort to limit birthright citizenship is or is not constitutional. Instead, they are limiting the power of these judges to block policies for the entire country, which will likely allow Trump to proceed with this effort to limit birthright citizenship while the larger constitutional questions about whether he can do that are being litigated. Now, just to explain to you the significance of this, one of President Trump's lawyers told me this is the ball game for President Trump's agenda because we know more than any modern president, he loves to govern through executive action. And the majority of these have been blocked by lower court judges. So he has not been able to follow through with things he wanted to do on the budget, on mass firings, on immigration.
All right. I need you to pay very close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because what just happened in federal court is not just another legal headline. This is the kind of ruling that could change everything, and I mean everything. We're talking about a federal judge absolutely dismantling President Trump's last remaining legal defense. The final wall of protection that his legal team has been building for years. It just came crashing down, and the timing of this could not be worse for the White House. Look, I've been covering Trump's legal battles for a long time now, and I've seen a lot of setbacks. I've seen a lot of bad rulings, but this one hits different. Because this isn't just about one case. This ruling has implications that stretch across multiple legal fronts. It destroys the core theory that Trump's lawyers have been relying on in case after case after case. And now that theory is gone. The foundation they built everything on has been ripped out from under them. There's no recovering from something like this easily. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Could block an executive action for the entire nation. And here, in a historic opinion, the justices are limiting that power. And again, President Trump's lawyers have told me this is the case that they are watching. This means everything for the president's ability to govern through executive actions. Now, we'll say these nationwide injunctions, this is a bipartisan concern. These have plagued every modern president. But because President Trump does so much through executive action, he has faced the greatest number of these nationwide injunctions. So he and his Republican allies here on Capitol Hill, they have been railing against these. This is a pet issue for them.
So what exactly happened? Let me break it down for you in a way that actually makes sense. A federal judge just ruled that Trump's deployment of the National Guard to Portland was illegal. And before you say, okay, that's about Portland, who cares? Let me explain why this matters so much more than you might think. Because the legal argument that Trump used to justify that deployment is the same argument his lawyers have been using everywhere. It's the foundation of his entire defense strategy across the board. The idea that the president has essentially unlimited executive power. The idea that presidential immunity shields him from consequences. The idea that courts can't really touch a sitting president no matter what he does. That whole framework just got demolished in one ruling. The judge didn't just rule against Trump on this one specific issue. The judge issued a permanent injunction. That means this isn't going away anytime soon. This isn't something that can be appealed easily. This is a permanent legal finding that Trump exceeded his constitutional authority. And that finding is now on the record for every other court to see and reference in their own decisions moving forward. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't happening in isolation, because just days later, literally days later, another federal court rejected Trump's immunity arguments again. That's twice in the span of about 2 weeks. And this second ruling specifically addressed efforts related to the 2020 election. The court said prosecutors can now use these rulings as evidence in ongoing cases. Think about what that means for a second. Every time Trump's lawyers walk into a courtroom now and try to claim presidential immunity, Prosecutors can point to these rulings and say, actually, no, that defense has already been rejected multiple times by multiple courts across this country. It's devastating. And then, because apparently bad news comes in threes, another judge denied Trump's motion to dismiss in yet another case. This one involves the hush money allegations that we've been hearing about for years. The judge rejected every single procedural defense that Trump's team threw at the wall. Every single one of them got tossed out, and the judge cleared the path to trial, March 25th. That's the date. Mark it on your calendar right now, because that's when everything changes. So, we've got 3 major rulings in the span of just a few weeks, all of them going against Trump, all of them stripping away the legal protections his team has spent years trying to build. And now the Supreme Court is set to hear arguments on December 8th about Trump's removal authority claims. That's just days away from now. And after what happened in these lower courts, after the complete collapse of Trump's defense strategy, nobody knows what the Supreme Court is going to do. But I can tell you this much, Trump's legal team has to be absolutely terrified right now, because the momentum has completely shifted against them. And once momentum shifts in legal battles like this, it's really hard to get it back. So stick around, because I'm going to explain exactly what these rulings mean. I'm going to show you how they connect to each other in ways most people don't understand. And I'm going to tell you what comes next, because trust me, this is far from over. We're just getting started. All right, let's really dig into this, because there's so much happening right now in Trump's legal universe that it's hard to keep track of it all. And honestly, I think that's by design. When you have this many cases going on at once, this many rulings, this many appeals, it's easy for people to lose the thread. It's easy for the really important stuff to get buried under all the noise. So let me connect the dots for you. Because once you see how all of these cases fit together, once you understand the pattern, it becomes crystal clear what's actually happening here. And what's happening is that Trump's entire legal defense strategy is falling apart at the seams. Let me start with the Portland ruling, because that's the one that triggered this whole cascade of bad news. Back during his first term, Trump deployed federal forces, including the National Guard, to Portland, Oregon during the protests in 2020. His administration claimed he had the authority to do this unilaterally without anyone's permission or oversight. They said the president has broad executive power to protect federal property and maintain order whenever he sees fit to do so. Now, here's why this matters so much for Trump's current legal situation. That same argument, this idea of expansive, almost unlimited presidential authority, is the backbone of Trump's defense in multiple cases. His lawyers have been arguing that as president, Trump had the power to do things that would be illegal for anyone else to do. They've been saying that presidential immunity protects him from prosecution for actions taken while in office. It's a sweeping theory of executive power that basically says the president is above the law. And for years, courts kind of went along with it, or at least they didn't directly challenge it in a meaningful way. But now a federal judge has looked at this theory and said, no, absolutely not. That's not how this works. The ruling wasn't subtle. It wasn't wishy-washy. The judge issued a permanent injunction. That's the strongest possible rebuke a court can give. It means the court found that Trump's actions were definitively illegal. Not just questionable, not just problematic, but actually unconstitutional. And that finding doesn't just stay in Portland. It travels to every other courtroom in the country where these issues are being litigated. Other courts can look at this ruling and use it as precedent for their own decisions. Prosecutors can cite it in their arguments. It becomes part of the legal landscape that everyone has to work within going forward. And that's exactly what happened just a few weeks later. Federal courts rejected Trump's immunity arguments in cases related to the 2020 election. The timing here is not a coincidence. These judges are clearly paying attention to what other courts are doing. And when they see that Trump's executive power claims are getting rejected, when they see permanent injunctions being issued, it emboldens them to rule the same way. It creates a snowball effect that keeps building momentum in one direction. One ruling leads to another. And now prosecutors have explicitly been told they can use these rulings as evidence in future proceedings. That's huge, because it means that in every future proceeding, every hearing, every trial, every motion, the prosecution can point to these cases and say, Your Honor, this exact argument has already been rejected by multiple federal courts, and we have the rulings to prove it. It's devastating for Trump's legal team in ways they probably never anticipated. They've spent years building up this fortress of presidential immunity. And now that fortress is crumbling brick by brick right before our eyes. But wait, there's more. Because then we have the hush money case. Now this one has been going on forever, right? It feels like we've been hearing about this case since the beginning of time. But here's what just happened. That changes everything. The judge denied Trump's motion to dismiss. And not just on one ground. On every single ground his lawyers raised. Trump's lawyers threw everything they had at this motion. They argued procedural issues. They argued jurisdictional problems. They argued that the whole case was politically motivated. The judge rejected all of it. Every single argument got tossed out. And then the judge did something even more significant. The judge set a trial date, March 25th. That means we're going to trial. No more delays. No more procedural games. This is actually happening. And the reason this matters so much is because the hush money case is arguably the strongest case against Trump from an evidence standpoint. The documents are there. The testimony is there. Michael Cohen already went to prison for his role in this scheme. So if Trump's defenses are collapsing, and they clearly are, this is the case where it's going to hurt the most. Now let's talk about what's coming up on December 8th, because the Supreme Court is about to weigh in on all of this. They're going to hear arguments about Trump's removal authority claims, and honestly, nobody knows what the Supreme Court is going to do. This is a court that has surprised people before. They've ruled against Trump in some cases. They've ruled for him in others. But here's what we do know. The lower court rulings that just came down are going to be on the minds of every single justice sitting on that bench. When you have multiple federal judges appointed by different presidents with different judicial philosophies, all reaching the same conclusion, that carries serious weight. It tells the Supreme Court that this isn't just one rogue judge with an agenda. This is a consensus forming in the federal judiciary. And that makes it much harder for the Supreme Court to reverse course, much harder for them to suddenly say, actually, Trump's immunity claims are valid after all. Because if they do that, they're overruling not just one court, but multiple courts across the country. They're setting themselves against the entire lower judiciary. That's a big step. And historically, the Supreme Court doesn't like to take steps like that unless they absolutely have to. And here's the thing that should really worry Trump's team. There was apparently a shocking admission in one of the recent court proceedings. Now, the details on this are still emerging, and we're still piecing it together. But from what we can tell, something happened in that courtroom that significantly damaged Trump's defense in a way that can't be undone. When your own side makes an admission that hurts your case, that's really hard to recover from. You can't unring that bell no matter how hard you try. Whatever was said is now part of the official record. And prosecutors are definitely going to use it against him at every opportunity. So when you put all of this together, the Portland ruling, the immunity rejections, the motion to dismiss denial, the trial date being set, the Supreme Court arguments coming up, and now this courtroom admission, you start to see a pattern emerging clearly. Trump's legal situation isn't just bad, it's getting worse. Rapidly. And the defenses that his team has been relying on for years, they're disappearing one by one. Alright, so let's break this down into the key points you absolutely need to understand. Because I know there's a lot of information flying around right now, and I want to make sure you walk away from this video knowing exactly what's happening and why it matters. So here we go. Point by point. Let's get into it. Point number 1. The presidential immunity fortress is crumbling. For years, literally years, Trump's legal strategy has been built on one core idea. The idea that a president has special protections that nobody else has. That you can't prosecute a sitting president no matter what they do. That executive power is so broad that courts can't really challenge presidential decisions. This has been the foundation of everything. Every time Trump faced legal trouble, his lawyers would pull out this immunity card. And for a while it worked. Courts were hesitant to rule against a sitting president. They didn't want to create constitutional crises. They deferred to executive authority. But that era is over. What we're seeing now is federal courts explicitly, repeatedly rejecting these immunity claims one after another. The Portland ruling wasn't ambiguous. The judge said Trump acted illegally. Period. End of story. And then other courts followed suit with their own rulings. When you have multiple federal judges all saying the same thing, that's not a coincidence. That's a trend. And trends and legal rulings tend to continue building momentum in the same direction. Point number 2. The timing of all this is absolutely brutal for Trump. Think about the calendar here for a second. We've got major rulings coming down in November. We've got Supreme Court arguments in December. We've got a trial date set for March. This is all happening in rapid succession with no breaks in between. There's no time for Trump's team to regroup. There's no time to develop new strategies. They're playing defense on multiple fronts simultaneously, and they're losing on all of them. And here's the thing about legal battles. Momentum matters more than most people realize. When you start losing cases, it becomes easier to lose more cases. Judges see what other judges are doing and take note. Prosecutors get emboldened by each victory they achieve. Your own lawyers start second-guessing themselves and their strategies. It creates a downward spiral that's incredibly hard to stop once it starts. And right now, Trump is in the middle of that spiral with no clear way out. The momentum has completely shifted against him. Every ruling that comes down makes the next ruling more likely to go the same way. That's just how the legal system works in practice. And anyone who tells you that Trump can easily reverse this They're not paying attention to what's actually happening in these courtrooms. Point number 3. The March 25th trial date is a game changer. Look, we've been waiting for Trump to actually face trial for years now. And every time it seemed like we were getting close, something would happen. A delay, an appeal, a procedural motion. His lawyers are very good at running out the clock. That's been their strategy all along. Delay, 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 until the political landscape changes in their favor. But this judge just said no more. March 25th, we're doing this. And the fact that the judge denied every single one of Trump's arguments in the motion to dismiss, every single one, that tells you something important. It tells you this judge is not interested in playing games. This judge wants to get to trial. This judge believes there's enough evidence to proceed. And once you get to trial, everything changes completely. Because in a trial, evidence gets presented to a jury, witnesses testify under oath, where lying has real consequences. The whole thing is public for everyone to see. You can't spin your way out of a trial. You can't tweet your way out of a trial. You actually have to defend yourself on the merits of the case. And based on what we know about the hush money case, the evidence is pretty damning. Michael Cohen went to prison for this exact scheme, and now Trump has to explain his role in the whole thing. Point number 4. The political implications are massive. Look, I know some people want to keep legal issues and political issues separate, and in an ideal world, maybe that would be possible. But we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a world where the current president is facing multiple federal court cases while simultaneously trying to run the country. The political implications are unavoidable, no matter how much anyone tries to separate them. Every time a court rules against Trump, it gives ammunition to his opponents. Every time his immunity claims get rejected, it raises questions about his legitimacy. And right now, with these rulings coming down one after another, the political pressure is building significantly. Public opinion is divided on Trump. It always has been. But these court rulings don't exist in a vacuum. People are watching. People are paying attention. And when federal judges, some of whom were appointed by Republican presidents, start saying that Trump acted illegally and unconstitutionally, that carries weight with a lot of people who might otherwise dismiss this. It's not just Democrats saying this anymore. It's the judicial system. It's the courts. And that's much harder to dismiss as partisan politics. Point number 5, the Supreme Court is the last line of defense. December 8th is coming up fast. That's when the Supreme Court hears arguments on Trump's removal authority claims. And honestly, this might be Trump's last real chance to salvage his legal position. If the Supreme Court rules in his favor, if they validate his expansive view of executive power, then maybe he can claw back some of the ground he's lost. Maybe he can slow down these prosecutions. Maybe he can buy himself more time to figure things out. But if the Supreme Court rules against him, or even if they issue a narrow ruling that doesn't give him what he needs, then it's basically over for his defense strategy. The lower court rulings will stand. The prosecutions will proceed. The trials will happen. And Trump will have to face the consequences of his actions without the shield of presidential immunity protecting him. That's what we're looking at. That's the stakes of December 8th. And based on what we've seen from the lower courts, based on the pattern of rulings that have come down over the past few weeks, the odds are not looking great for Trump. The momentum is against him. The legal consensus is forming against him. And the Supreme Court is going to have to decide whether to swim against that current or go with the flow. So where does this leave us? It leaves us at a pivotal moment in American history. We have a sitting president whose legal defenses are collapsing in real time. We have federal courts issuing rulings that undermine his claims of executive authority. We have trial dates being set. We have the Supreme Court about to weigh in on everything. This is unprecedented. There's no playbook for this situation. Nobody knows exactly how it's going to play out. But one thing is clear. The walls are closing in. The legal fortress that Trump's team spent years building is falling apart piece by piece. And all the spin in the world, all the tweets, all the rallies, all the political theater, none of that changes what's happening in the courtroom. The law is the law. And right now, the law is not on Trump's side. All right, that's going to do it for this video. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure you hit that subscribe button because there's a lot more coming. December 8th is just days away. We're going to cover that Supreme Court hearing in detail. And of course, we're counting down to March 25th. I'll see you in the next one.